Hi there, it's Anne of Rosy Duck Designs here. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. The project that I'm going to share with you this time is going to include some products from the Fine Art Floral Suite, which you can find on pages 32 through to 34 in the new January to June mini catalogue. I'm going to be using a piece of the designer series paper, so I'm going to start with sharing that paper with you. It's really pretty, so I think it deserves to be shown. There are lots of really nice colours in the designer series paper, and I'm just going to read those off the back because I will never remember them. So we have Bumblebee, Flirty Flamingo, Merry Merlot, Mossy Meadow, Night of Navy, Old Olive, Petal Pink, Pool Party, Poppy Parade, Pumpkin Pie, So Saffron, Terracotta Tile and Whisper White. It's not easy reading through polythene. I probably should have took the back sheet out, but there you go. So let's just have a look at these beautiful papers to start with. So there's some beautiful floral images, but there's also some lovely background papers, and there's also some acetate sheets that's part of that suite, but we'll talk about those another time. So this is actually the paper that I'm going to be using today, and I'm going to be using this background paper. It's definitely a paper to use on a dreary day like today. So there we go. £10.75 for the pack of paper, which is really pretty. I'm looking forward to using a lot more of that as the weeks go by. Also, I'm going to be using probably what is my most favourite product out of this catalogue, and that is this Gilded Leaf. I have to say I'm having a lot of fun using that, so I thought I had to put it into a tutorial sooner rather than later. So let's put our card together first of all. So I'm going to start with a base card of Pool Party, and it's cut at my normal size of 6x8, scored at 4 on the long side. I'm just going to burnish that edge. So that would be 15x20, scored at 10 on the long side in metric, and we're going to be using the card as a portrait style. I need one layer of the white cardstock for the inside of the card, and that's going to measure 3 3/4 by 5 3/4, or 9.5 by 14.5 centimetres, and I've cut the same size from the piece of the designer series paper, so that's got the bright blue on one side, but I just want that as a base layer on the top of my card, so it's not really going to be particularly standing out, but it's just going to give a different slightly different look to the back of the card, because the star of the show is going to be a flower with some gold gilding on it. So again, that is cut at 3 3/4 by 5 3/4, or 9.5 by 14.5. So I will stick that onto the front of the card. I thought for one horrible moment I hadn't brought my adhesive in. So if you haven't seen my last tutorial, I'm now onto the stamp and seal, and it's working well. I've adapted. Do I miss my snail? Yes, if I'm honest, I do, but this is fine. It works well. So I'm just going to centralise that onto the front of my card. And then before we stick this one on, we're going to do a little bit of stamping just to brighten up the inside. I'm not going to put a sentiment on the inside because there's one going on the front, so I just want a little flower of some description. So I'm using the coordinating stamp set that goes with that suite, and it's the Art Gallery photopolymer stamp set. So nice selection of floral stamps as well as some really good sentiments. So the stamp that I'm going to use is going to be this one, which I've already got on my block, and although real red isn't a colour that actually features within the suite or the colour palette of the suite, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to be using anything that's got any other colour in it other than Pool Party. And the flower really is the centerpiece, and I think that looks really nice in real red. So that's what I'm going to be sticking with. So I just want to do a little bit of design on the inside of the card. I'm not putting a sentiment inside, I'm just going to put one on the front, but I just want to pretty up the inside very slightly. So I'm just taking that stamp and I'm just going to not put the whole stamp on, but just put an element of it in the corner, and the same on the other side. And before I started, I've used the same stamp just to pretty up the envelope. I will be coming back to the ink pad because I just wanted to share a little bit of information about that, but we'll do that a bit later. I'm going to add some Wink of Stella to that because it's kind of rude not to, isn't it? We're going to have gold on the front so we can have some shimmer in the middle. It's blending it slightly, so I'm getting some pink colouring, which I think is, in a way, is just adding to the design. Which is, in some ways, just sort of finishes that off quite nicely. In this terrible light, you won't be able to see the Wink of Stella, I know, but it's on there. I'm hoping this video is actually going to come out okay, given the lack of natural light. I thought it had brightened up, but when I pressed the play button, no, it hasn't. So that's the inside of my card, and that's ready now just to stick inside. I don't think that is wet anymore. I just didn't want to take a chance. So I'm just going to centralise that into the centre of my card. And then we need to then start working on the front of the card. I've cut a piece of Pool Party, and that is 2.5 by 4.25 or 6.5 by 11 centimetres. And then I've got a piece of Whisper White, or it will be basic white now, that is 4 inches by 2.25 inches or 5.7 by 10. And it's on this piece that we're going to put our design. And I need an extra piece of white card that I'm going to stamp some leaves on. I want the leaves to stick directly onto the piece of card, so I'm actually going to use a piece of an adhesive sheet. Now normal glue will work, it just makes life a little bit easier to stick it onto the front of the card. purely because the stem element, when I cut it out, is quite fine. Obviously with the glue just on your leaves that will be absolutely fine, but the die cut will cut out the stem, and the stem will also have a piece of sticky glue sheet on the back, just making it easier for the leaf to stick down on the project. So again, I'm using a colour that is not in the suite, but it works really well with real red, and that is one of my favourites, Granny Green Apple. So flipping that over, making sure that the stamp is attached to my block. It's always a good plan. So I'm going to obviously stamp that where my adhesive sheet is, and then I need to then cut that out with my Big Shot. So I'll put that to one side for a moment. So what I need next is another piece of white card, and using my Real Red stamp pad, I'm going to stamp out the fall flower, which is already on my block. And then we get to play with the gold leaf. So I'm going to get that ready. It comes in this little pot, and I've got here just a standard takeaway container. This is only going to be a fairly small piece of card, so it's going to fit into there quite nicely. If you were going to do a bigger card front, then I would suggest you use a larger container. As you open this, be careful because it is very tightly packed and it can come over the top, especially when it's first opened. So if you've got it in a container as you take the lid off, then anything that falls out you'll catch at the bottom. It's got a really strange texture to it, I have to say, very, very soft, and it's very static as well. So what I'm going to do is just tip a nice lot in there, because you can always then put it back in the pot when you've finished. And I have to say I've deliberately shut the door to the room today because I don't think gold flakes and cats particularly mix. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take this stamp and I'm going to put some Versamark on that. So I'm going to take the Versamark to the stamp because it's quite a large stamp. So it's very much like working with embossing powder, but I'm actually going to be using a heat and stick powder. So I'm just positioning that above my stamped image. And then I've got a spare piece of paper, and I'm going to be tipping the heat and stick powder over that. Put the lid back on in a moment, it makes much more sense. So I'm just going to put my powder back and put the lid back on safely. And then I'm going to get that just out of the way because I don't want it getting blown away with my heat tool. So I'm putting the heat tool on now and heating it as you would embossing powder. You can see the white outline that you could see before has disappeared because it's effectively melted. And then I'm just putting that into my container with the gold foil. And I've got one of the sponges that you'll find in the catalogue. I think there's 3 in a packet, and I've literally taken one of those and cut them into a quarter. I'm very gently going to just rub off the excess gold leaf. I'm starting gently, but there was rather a lot in this area, so I've got a little bit heavier with the rubbing off of the sponge. Now I have my flower with its gold leaf attached to it. Now the sensible thing would obviously be to put this all straight back in the container, but for the sake of the fact that I don't want the video to go on any more longer than it has to, and also because we might be running out of light very, very soon, I'm going to put that up there and hope that nothing drastic happens to it. So I have the coordinating dies here, and we've got this one for the flower. So I'm just grabbing my Big Shot platform here. Probably easier to do it this way than fight against the magnet at this point. Now I'm going to lay a piece of post-it note over the entire thing to protect the gold foiling, because the pressure of the plate on top of that, particularly with the state my plates are in, could do it some damage. So one is actually holding the plate in place, and the first layer is actually protecting my stamped image. So I'm just going to stop the video and just run this through my Big Shot. So I've done that, and I now have my cut out flower, and I've also done the leaf while I had the Big Shot ready. So again, I've just used a post-it note to keep the die in place. Although I've used it on my magnetic platform, it just ensures that nothing moves. So put that out of the way. So now we need to start building our card up. So back to the little piece of white that we cut out, which seems so long ago, but that was the 4" by 2 1/4 or 5.7 by 10, so it's this piece here. And I want to put the leaf round about there, and then the flower is going to go up on some dimensionals there. So taking off the back of my adhesive sheet, thinking about it, it's probably be a much better idea to stick this onto the pool party piece of card that I've also got. If you're using the stamp and seal and the glue seems to disappear, then all you need to do is just wind it on gently with the tip of your finger and the glue will reappear. So the pool party strip was 2.5 by 4 1/4 inches, 6.5 by 11, and I'm just going to put that in the middle. And then I'm going to grab some stamping dimensionals. and just put them on the back of my flower. Be generous and we'll have 4. I'm just going to pop that on the top of the stemmies, and then I'm going to add some more Stampin' Dimensionals on the back here. So we've got a nice lot of layers and height with our card. I can find the card in the debris that is on my desk. There we go. So there's our card, and I'm just going to put that in the middle. Now I'm going to add a sentiment to that, and I did actually do that earlier because that was a bit fiddly, but I've used the Thinking of You stamp here, which actually says I'm thinking of you, but if you want it coming from more than one person, you just want the sentiment of thinking of you. So that's what I've done here, and basically all I did was stamp that with my real red ink onto a piece of white card, and I literally very carefully trimmed it down until it fitted onto this tiny piece of Pool Party, which has been cut out using that die from the stamp set. So I would suggest that you cut that out first, then you know what size you're working to, and then literally, as you can see, it just about clears the words. So you've got your words there, but there's hardly any gap. So it's a bit of a painstaking process, but it can be done. I just didn't think it was necessarily the best idea for me to do that on camera, because who knows how long that would take. But the idea is I'm going to just put that across the top here, and again I'm going to put that on some dimensionals. You could obviously use a punch, one of the long punches where you can cut out the banner punches, or you could just use one of the ovals, the oval die cuts, or an oval or label punch with a sentiment on it. The Thinking of You is quite a long sentiment, so if probably one of the banner punches would be a good idea. As I say, this works really well. It just needs a little bit of patience to get the sentiment to fit onto your backing card. So I've used the mini dimensionals on here. It's a tiny piece of card. It seemed like a good idea at the time. So I'm just going to have that coming across the top here. Have a bit of stem showing below. So there we go, that's our finished card, if you can still see it in this light. So I hope that's been a good introduction, or a helpful introduction at least, into the gold, the gilding embellishment. So a couple of things. I said I would go back and just talk about the ink pad. Now this, I treated myself to a new ink pad, and I know I have said this on several occasions, but if you are new to stamping, you may not be aware of a couple of the things that are quite handy when it comes to a Stampin' Up ink pad. On the back you can see there's you've got 3 different languages, no 4 different languages even of the colour, and then you've got a blank strip here. I'm going to go with the English because that's the only one I'm going to understand. So you're just lifting up this little tab at one end here. You can peel off the real red. I'll put that on the side of my desk for a moment, and then coming down to the bottom bit, which is totally blank, I'm going to take that bit off as well. Stick that back on there. When you store an ink pad, you need to store it upside down so that the ink comes from the bottom to the top, so that when you turn it over and you open it, then the ink is ready to be used. So we need it that way round. So the actual name, although that's the right way up for the pad, the way to store it and your name needs to go along this top here. So we just take the real red and effectively put it upside down. Like so. And then when you open up the ink pad, there's a little sort of gap here which enables you to fit this little strip into, so that when you're working with your ink pad you can see what colour is in the ink pad. Now when you've got a pink and a red it's not that difficult, but sometimes if you've got a couple of blues that you've got open or a couple of greens, it's not quite so easy to see the colour. So it's very easy sometimes when you're not thinking about it to stick your stamp into the wrong ink pad. By having that little extra reminder there, it helps you to see that that is actually your red ink pad, as opposed to here we've got the green. So just a couple of little handy tips about the ink pads. Finally, the Thinking of You stamp. If you don't want the I'm thinking of you, just want thinking of you, there's a couple of options. You could put the whole stamp onto your block and then into your ink, and then take off the additional ink with maybe a cotton bud or something like that. The other alternative is to cut just a piece of post-it note and then you're just going to put it's the sticky bit that you want, and then just put that over the bit of the stamp that you don't want. If you cut it long enough, it will stick on both sides of the stamp. You can then get your ink, peel off the post-it note, find a random piece of card, and there you have your thinking of you rather than I'm thinking of you. So again, just another little idea of how you can use that stamp set. So thank you so much for joining me. As usual, my normal links will be on the front, the link to my blog, link to my shop, and some details about the products that I've used. I'll be back with more ideas. At the moment it's probably going to be donkeys, if I'm honest, the donkey celebration set. I think I've resisted for long enough, so I think it's safe to say I'll be back with a donkey card. But until then, please look after yourselves, take care. If you've enjoyed my video, then a thumbs up would be greatly appreciated. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, I would really love that as well. But as I say, until next time, take care. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.